Hi.
Hi.
Oh god, you're buzzing.
Oh no!
You had bees on you. They're
Am
gone
I
now.
fine? Am I fine? Am I fine? One
Yeah,
second.
the bees are gone.
Don't scare me like that.
Hi,
Oh.
Pandora.
Hi, Pandora. Thank you for coming. Oh, I told myself I wouldn't get the giggles. Obviously this was not the case. We knew this from the beginning, though.
Yeah, it's okay.
Oh, there was no way. There was no way. Oh, well.
So, okay, this is the... Now I got the giggles. This is a special event.
Stream.
Yeah, it's a special day. Because in 69 days, it'll be illegal to respect women.
Yep. In 69 days from now, all of Sherlock Holmes will be public domain, and he is allowed to respect women. And so we're celebrating.
Yeah.
We're gonna tell you a little bedtime story, alright?
Yeah, we're actually gonna tell you two bedtime stories.
Two bedtime stories. So if you fall asleep in the first one,
you gotta wake back up in the middle and fall asleep in the second one too.
Yeah.
There will be a little break in the middle so you can wake up.
Yeah, so if you need to get like a little a nice little warm milk. Do we have any points of business before we do things?
No, hi Clutie.
Hi Clutie. Yeah, so we got two stories for you tonight. We have The Adventure of the Devil's Foot and The Adventure of the Three Garadevs. We've done so much fucking work on this very stupid 69 joke.
Literally, for 3 weeks we've been practicing.
It's been like 3 weeks of
Also, thank you to Bar, who I think is asleep right now, for doing all this art.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bar. This looks so fucking good.
Right, yeah.
Everyone follow Bar on Tumblr. Giant goldfish. Or I'll kill you, I guess.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Yeah. Seems fair enough to me. Designer of our beautiful bespoke 69 joke PNG tubers.
Yeah.
Which we are so grateful for because they look so good.
Yeah, they're really good.
We're the cutest bitches alive.
I think that's... Are you ready?
These were written in 1910 and 1925. We picked good ones. But, like...
Right.
Your discretion? Sure.
There's no slurs.
There's no slurs.
We wouldn't pick one with slurs.
Yeah.
And if we did, we would edit them out.
Yes. Is that everything?
I think that's everything.
Yeah.
And
we'll get comfy.
Viewer discretion. I'm so scared.
We're being so brave right now. I need you all to know how brave we're being. We're the bravest people ever.
We're being so brave. We're little birthday boys.
We're little birthday boys and we're so brave and little on our birthday. Do you know this? And with that, everyone get fucking cozy. And enjoy the silliest thing we've ever done.
Yeah. I figured also
Sherlock Holmes women respecting 69 joke extravaganza.
I should have made a graphic called for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been a good idea and definitely not a bad one.
Right. I'm getting a spam call right now, but I'm just gonna not accept that. And my sister sent me a picture of a puppy, but that's not as important as the stream. so I'm not
Yeah,
even
we're
going to look
doing
at the
this thing
picture.
now.
Oh. Also, thank you, Scraps, for curating the music tonight.
Yeah, curating is a generous term, but I appreciate it.
You literally made playlists. That's just curation. Cleve, what does that mean?
A pipe?
Yeah, I have a pipe.
Oh. Anyway, hi, Pigeon. You came just in time, yes.
Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Oh my god, hi, Scout. You're
Hi,
just in time
Scout.
as well.
Yeah.
This is our 69 joke, Sherlock Holmes respects women, celebration. Everyone have a wonderful time, okay?
Yeah, so senior pause and peep. What's it? Un pipe. It's just not French.
Pipe.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad, Cleve. Fucking buckle up. Don't laugh.
I'm not even laughing.
I can hear you.
I'm so grown up and mature. I've never laughed in my life.
Okay, I'm gonna fucking start. In recording from time to time some of the curious experiences and interesting recollections which I associate with my long and intimate friendship with Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I have continually been faced by difficulties caused by his own aversion to publicity. To his somber and cynical spirit, all popular applause was always abhorrent, and nothing amused him more at the end of a successful case than to hand over the actual exposure to some orthodox official, and to listen with a mocking smile to the general chorus of misplaced congratulation. It was indeed this attitude upon the part of my friend, and certainly not any lack of interesting material, which has caused me of late years to lay very few of my records before the public. My participation in some of his adventures was always a privilege, which entailed discretion and reticence upon me. It was then with considerable surprise that I received a telegram from Holmes last Tuesday. He has never been known to write where a telegram would serve, in the following terms.
Why not tell him of the Cornish horror? Strangest case I have handled.
I have no idea what backward sweep of memory had brought the matter fresh to his mind, or what freak had caused him to desire that I should recount it. But I hasten, before another cancelling telegram may arrive, to hunt out the notes which gave me the exact details of the case, and to lay the narrative before my readers. It was then, in the spring of the year 1897, that Holmes's iron constitution showed some symptoms of giving way in the face of constant hard work of a most exacting kind, aggravated perhaps by occasional indiscretions of his own. In March of that year, Dr. Moore Agar of Harley Street, whose dramatic introduction to Holmes I may some day recount, gave positive injunctions that the famous private agent lay aside all his cases and surrender himself to complete rest if he wished to avert an absolute breakdown. The state of his health was not a matter in which he himself took the faintest interest, for his mental detachment was absolute, but he was induced at last, on the threat of being permanently disqualified from work, to give himself a complete change of scene and air. Thus it was that in the early spring of that year we found ourselves together in a small cottage near Poldhu Bay, at the further extremity of the Cornish peninsula. It was a singular spot, and one peculiarly well suited to the grim humour of my patient. From the windows of our little whitewashed house, which stood high upon a grassy headland, we looked down upon the whole sinister semicircle of Mounts Bay, that old death-trap of sailing vessels, with its fringe of black cliffs and surge-swept reefs on which innumerable seamen have met their end. With a northerly breeze it lies placid and sheltered, inviting the storm-tossed craft to tack into it for rest and protection. Then comes the sudden swirl round of the wind, the blistering gale from the southwest, the dragging anchor, the lee shore, and the last battle in the creaming breakers. The wise mariner stands far out from that evil place. On the land side, our surroundings were as sombre as on the sea. It was a country of rolling moors, lonely and dun-coloured, with an occasional church tower to mark the site of some old-world village. In every direction upon these moors, there were traces of some vanished race which had passed utterly away, and left as its sole record strange monuments of stone, irregular mounds which contained the which contained the burned ashes of the dead, and curious earthworks which hinted at prehistoric strife. The glamour and mystery of the place, with its sinister atmosphere of forgotten nations, appealed to the imagination of my friend, and he spent much of his time in long walks and solitary meditations upon the moor. The ancient Cornish language had also arrested his attention, and he had, I remember, conceived the idea that it was akin to the Chaldean, and had been largely derived from the Phoenician traders in tin. He had received a consignment of books upon philology, and was settling down to develop this thesis, when suddenly, to my sorrow and to his unfeigned delight, we found ourselves, even in that land of dreams, plunged into a problem at our very doors which was more intense, more engrossing, and infinitely more mysterious than any of those which had driven us from London. Our simple life and peaceful, healthy routine were violently interrupted, and we were precipitated into the midst of a series of events which caused the utmost excitement, not only in Cornwall, but throughout the whole west of England. Many of my readers may retain some recollection of what was called at the time the Cornish Horror, though a most imperfect account of the matter reached the London press. Now, after 13 years, I will give the true details of this inconceivable affair to the public. I have said that scattered towers marked the villages which dotted this part of Cornwall. The nearest of these was the hamlet of Tredannick Wallace, where the cottages of a couple of hundred inhabitants clustered round an ancient moss-grown church. The vicar of the parish, Mr. Roundhay, was something of an archaeologist, and as such Holmes had made his acquaintance. He was a middle-aged man, portly and affable, with a considerable fund of local lore. At his invitation we had taken tea at the vicarage, and had come to know also Mr. Mortimer Tregennis, an independent gentleman, who increased the clergyman's scanty resources by taking rooms in his large straggling house. The vicar, being a bachelor, was glad to come to such an arrangement, though he had little in common with his lodger, who was a thin, dark, spectacled man, with a stoop which gave the impression of actual physical deformity. I remember that during our short visit we found the vicar garrulous, but his lodger strangely reticent, a sad-faced, introspective man, sitting with averted eyes, brooding apparently upon his own affairs. These were the two men who entered abruptly into our little sitting-room on Tuesday, March the 16th, shortly after our breakfast hour, as we were smoking together, preparatory to our daily excursion upon the moors.
Mr. Holmes, the most extraordinary and tragic affair has occurred during the night. It's the most unheard of business. We can only regard it as a special providence that you should chance to be here at the time, for in all England you are the one man we need.
I glared at the intrusive vicar with no very friendly eyes, but Holmes took his pipe from his lips and sat up in his chair like an old hound who hears the view-hello. He waved his hand to the sofa, and our palpitating visitor with his agitated companion sat side by side upon it. Mr. Mortimer Tregennis was more self-contained than the clergyman, but the twitching of his thin hands and the brightness of his dark eyes showed that they shared a common emotion.
Shall I speak, or you? Well, as you seem to have made the discovery, whatever it may be, and the vicar to have had it second-hand, perhaps you had better do the speaking.
I glanced at the hastily clad clergyman, with the formally dressed lodger seated beside him, and was amused at the surprise which Holmes's simple deduction had brought to their faces.
Perhaps I had best say a few words first, and then you can judge if you will listen to the details from Mr. Tregennis, or whether we should not hasten at once to the scene of this mysterious affair. I may explain, then, that our friend here spent last evening in the company of his two brothers, Owen and George, and of his sister Brenda, at their house of Tredannick Waller, which is near the old stone cross upon the moor. He left them shortly after 10 o'clock, playing cards round the dining-room table in excellent health and spirits. This morning, being an early riser, he walked in that direction before breakfast, and was overtaken by the carriage of Dr. Richards, who explained that he had just been sent for on a most urgent call to Tredannick Waller. Mr. Mortimer Tregennis naturally went with him. When he arrived at Tredanic Water, he found an extraordinary state of things. His two brothers and his sister were seated round the table exactly as he had left them, the cards still spread in front of him, and the candles burned down to their sockets. The sister lay back, stone dead in her chair, while the two brothers sat on each side of her, laughing, shouting, and singing, the senses stricken clean out of them. All three of them, the dead woman and the two demented men, retained upon their faces an expression of the utmost horror, a convulsion of terror which was dreadful to look upon. There was no sign of the presence of anyone in the house except Mrs. Porter, the old cook and housekeeper, who declared that she had slept deeply and heard no sound during the night. Nothing had been stolen or disarranged. And there is absolutely no explanation of what the horror can be which has frightened a woman to death and two strong men out of their senses. There is the situation, Mr. Holmes, in a nutshell, and if you can help us to clear it up, you'll have done a great work.
I had hoped that in some way I could coax my companion back into the quiet which had been the object of our journey, but one glance at his intense face and contracted eyebrows told me how vain was now the expectation. He sat for some little time in silence, absorbed in the strange drama which had broken in upon our peace.
I will look into this matter. On the face of it, it would appear to be a case of a very exceptional nature. Have you been here yourself, Mr. Roundhay? No, Mr. Holmes. Mr. Tregennis brought the account back to the vicarage, and I at once hurried over with him to consult you. How far is it to the house where this singular tragedy occurred? About a mile inland. Then we shall walk over together, but before we start, I must ask you a few questions, Mr. Mortimer Tregennis.
The other had been silent all this time, but I had observed that his more controlled excitement was even greater than the obtrusive emotion of the clergyman. He sat with a pale, drawn face, his anxious gaze fixed upon Holmes, and his thin hands clasped convulsively together. His pale lips quivered as he listened to the dreadful experience which had befallen his family, and his dark eyes seemed to reflect something of the horror of the scene.
Ask what you like, Mr. Holmes. It is a bad thing to speak of, but I will answer you the truth. Tell me about last night. Well, Mr. Holmes, I supped there, as the vicar had said, and my elder brother George proposed a game of whist afterwards. We sat down about 9 o'clock. It was 10:15 when I moved to go. I left them all round the table, as merry as could be. Who let you out? Mrs. Porter had gone to bed, so I let myself out. I shut the hall door behind me. The window of the room in which they sat was closed, but the blind was not drawn down. There was no change in door or window this morning, or any reason to think that any stranger had been to the house. Yet there they sat, driven clean mad with terror, and Brenda lying dead of fright with her head hanging over the arm of the chair. I'll never get the sight of that room out of my mind so long as I live. The facts as you state them are certainly most remarkable. I take it that you have no theory yourself which can in any way account for them. It's devilish, Mr. Holmes, devilish. It is not of this world. Something has come into that room which has dashed the light of reason from their minds. What human contrivance could do that? I fear that if the matter is beyond humanity, then it is certainly beyond me. Yet, we must exhaust all natural explanations before we fall back upon such theory as this. As for yourself, Mr. Tregennis, I take it you were divided in some way from your family, since they lived together and you had rooms apart? That is so, Mr. Holmes, though the matter is past and done with. We were a family of tin miners at Redruth, but we sold our venture to a company, and so retired with enough to keep us. I won't deny that there was some feeling about the division of the money, and it stood between us for a time, but it was all forgiven and forgotten, and we were the best of friends together. Looking back at the evening which you spent together, does anything stand out in your memory as throwing any possible light upon the tragedy? Think carefully, Mr. Tregennis, for any clue which can help me. There is nothing at all, sir. Your people were in their usual spirits? Never better. Were they nervous people? Did they ever show any apprehension of coming danger? Nothing of the kind. You have nothing to add, then, which could assist me.
Mortimer Tregennis considered earnestly for a moment.
There is one thing that occurs to me. As we sat at the table, my back was to the window, and my brother George, he being my partner at cards, was facing it. I saw him once look hard over my shoulder, so I turned round and looked also. The blind was up and the window shut, but I could just make out the bushes on the lawn, and it seemed to me for a moment that I saw something moving among them. I couldn't even say if it was man or animal, but I just thought there was something there. When I asked him what he was looking at, he told me that he had the same feeling. That is all that I can say.
Did you not investigate?
No, the matter passed as unimportant.
You left them then, without any premonition of evil?
None at all.
I am not clear how you came to hear the news so early this morning.
I am an early riser and generally take a walk before breakfast.
This morning I had hardly started when the doctor in his carriage overtook me. He told me that old Mrs. Porter had sent a boy down with an urgent message. I sprang in beside him and we drove on. When we got there, we looked into that dreadful room. The candles in the fire must have burned out hours before, and they'd been sitting there in the dark until dawn had broken. The doctor said Brenda must have been dead at least 6 hours. There were no signs of violence. She just lay across the arm of the chair with that look on her face. George and Owen were singing snatches of songs and gibbering like two great apes. Oh, it was awful to see. I couldn't stand it, and the doctor was as white as a sheet. Indeed, he fell into a chair in a sort of faint, and we nearly had him on our hands as well.
Remarkable.
Most remarkable. I think, perhaps, we had better go down to Tredannick Walther without further delay. I confess that I have seldom known a case which at first sight presented a more singular problem.
Our proceedings of that first morning did little to advance the investigation. It was marked, however, at the outset by an incident which left the most sinister impression upon my mind. The approach to the spot at which the tragedy occurred is down a narrow, winding country lane. While we made our way along it, we heard the rattle of a carriage coming towards us, and stood aside to let it pass. As it drove by us, I caught a glimpse through the closed window of a horribly contorted, grinning face glaring out at us. Those staring eyes and gnashing teeth flashed past us like a dreadful vision.
My brothers! They are taking them to Helston!
We looked with horror after the black carriage lumbering upon its way. Then we turned our steps towards this ill-omened house in which they had met their strange fate. It was a large and bright dwelling, rather a villa than a cottage, with a considerable garden which was already, in that Cornish air, well filled with spring flowers. Towards this garden the window of the sitting-room fronted, and from it, according to Mortimer Tregennis, must have come that thing of evil which had by sheer horror in a single instant blasted their minds. Holmes walked slowly and thoughtfully among the flower plots and along the path before we entered the porch. So absorbed was he in his thoughts, I remember, that he stumbled over the watering pot, upset its contents, and deluged both our feet and the garden path. Inside the house we were met by the elderly Cornish housekeeper, Mrs. Porter, who, with the aid of a young girl, looked after the wants of the family. She readily answered all Holmes's questions. She had heard nothing in the night. Her employers had all been in excellent spirits lately, and she had never known them more cheerful and prosperous. She had fainted with horror upon entering the room in the morning, and seeing that dreadful company round the table. She had, when she recovered, thrown open the window to let the morning air in, and had run down to the lane, whence she had sent a farm lad for the doctor. The lady was on her bed upstairs if we cared to see her. It took 4 strong men to get the brothers into the asylum carriage. She would not herself stay in the house another day, and was starting that very afternoon to rejoin her family at St. Ives. We ascended the stairs and viewed the body. Miss Brenda Tregennis had been a very beautiful girl, though now verging upon middle age. Her dark, clear-cut face was handsome even in death, but there still lingered upon it something of that convulsion of horror which had been our last human emotion. From her bedroom we descended to the sitting-room, where this strange tragedy had actually occurred. The charred ashes of the overnight fire lay in the grate. On the table were the 4 guttered and burned-out candles, with the cards scattered over its surface. The chairs had been moved back against the walls, but all else was as it had been the night before. Holmes paced with light, swift steps about the room. He sat in the various chairs, drawing them up and reconstructing their positions. He tested how much of the garden was visible. He examined the floor, the ceiling, and the fireplace, But never once did I see that sudden brightening of his eyes and tightening of his lips which would have told me that he saw some gleam of light in this utter darkness.
Why a fire? Had they always a fire in this small room on a spring evening?
Mortimer Tregennis explained that the night was cold and damp. For that reason, after his arrival, the fire was lit.
What are you going to do now, Mr. Holmes?
My friend smiled and laid his hand upon my arm.
Sorry. I think, Watson, that I shall resume that course of tobacco poisoning which you have so often and so justly condemned. With your permission, gentlemen, we will now return to our cottage, for I am not aware that any new factor is likely to come to our notice here. I will turn the facts over in my mind, Mr. Tregennis, and should anything occur to me, I will certainly communicate with you and the vicar. In the meantime, I wish you both good morning.
It was not until long after we were back in Poldhu Cottage that Holmes broke his complete and absorbed silence. He sat coiled in his armchair, his haggard and ascetic face hardly visible amid the blue swirl of his tobacco smoke, his black brows drawn down, his forehead contracted, his eyes vacant and far away. Finally, he laid down his pipe and sprang to his feet.
It won't do, Watson. Let us walk along the cliffs together in search of flint arrows. We are more likely to find them than clues to this problem. To let the brain work without sufficient materials, like racing an engine, it racks itself to pieces. Sea air, sunshine, and patience, Watson. All else will come. Now, let us calmly define our position, Watson. Let us get a firm grip of the very little which we do know, so that when fresh facts arise, we may be ready to fit them into their places. I take it, in the first place, that neither of us is prepared to admit diabolical intrusions into the affairs of men. Let's begin by rolling that entirely out of our minds. Very good. There remain 3 persons who have been grievously stricken by some conscious or unconscious human agency. That is firm ground. Now, when did this occur? Evidently, assuming his narrative to be true, it was immediately after Mr. Mortimer Tregennis had left the room. That is a very important point. The presumption is that it was within a few minutes afterwards. The cards still lay upon the table. It was already past their usual hour for bed, yet they had not changed their position or pushed back their chairs. I repeat, then, that the occurrence was immediately after his departure and not later than 11 o'clock last night. Our next obvious step is to check, so far as we can, the movements of Mortimer Tregennis after he left the room. In this there is no difficulty, and they seem to be above suspicion. Knowing my methods as you do, you were, of course, so conscious of the somewhat clumsy water-pot expedient by which I obtained a clearer impress of his foot than I might otherwise have been possible. The wet, sandy path took it admirably. Last night was also wet, you'll remember, and it was not difficult, having obtained a sample print, to pick out his track among others and to follow his movements. He appears to have walked away swiftly in the direction of the vicarage. If, then, Mortimer Tregennis disappeared from the scene, and yet some outside person affected the card players, how can we reconstruct that person, and how was such an impression of horror conveyed? Mrs. Porter may be eliminated, she is evidently harmless. Is there any evidence that someone crept up to the garden window and in some manner produced so terrific an effect that he drove those who saw it out of their senses? The only suggestion in this direction comes from Mortimer Tregennis himself, who says that his brother spoke about some movement in the garden. That is certainly remarkable, as the night was rainy, cloudy, and dark. Anyone who had the design to alarm these people would be compelled to place his very face against the glass before he could be seen. There is a 3-foot flower border outside this window, but no indication of a footmark. It is difficult to imagine, then, how an outsider could have made so terrible an impression upon the company, nor have we found any possible motive for so strange and elaborate an attempt. You perceive our difficulties, Watson?
They are only too clear.
And yet, with a little more material, we may prove that they are not insurmountable. I fancy that among your extensive archives, Watson, you may find some which were nearly as obscure. Meanwhile, we shall put the case aside until more accurate data are available and devote the rest of our morning to the pursuit of Neolithic man.
I may have commented upon my friend's power of mental detachment, but never have I wondered at it more than upon that spring morning in Cornwall, when for 2 hours he discoursed upon celts, arrowheads, and shards as lightly as if no sinister mystery were waiting for his solution. It was not until we had returned in the afternoon to our cottage that we found a visitor awaiting us, who soon brought our minds back to the matter in hand. Neither of us needed to be told who that visitor was. The huge body, the craggy and deeply seamed face with the fierce eyes and hawk-like nose, the grizzled hair which nearly brushed our cottage ceiling, the beard, golden at the fringes and white near the lips, save for the nicotine stain from his perpetual cigar. All these were as well known in London as in Africa, and could only be associated with the tremendous personality of Dr. Leon Sterndale, the great lion hunter and explorer. We had heard of his presence in the district, and had once or twice caught sight of his tall figure upon the moorland paths. He made no advances to us, however, nor would we have dreamed of doing so to him, as it was well known that it was his love of seclusion which caused him to spend the greater part of the intervals between his journeys in a small bungalow buried in the lonely wood of Beauchamp-Ariens. Here, amid his books and his maps, he lived an absolutely lonely life, attending to his own simple wants and paying little apparent heed to the affairs of his neighbours. It was a surprise to me, therefore, to hear him asking Holmes in an eager voice whether he had made any advance in his reconstruction of this mysterious episode. "The county police are utterly at fault, but perhaps your wider experience has suggested some conceivable explanation. My only claim to being taken into your confidence is that during my many residences here I have come to know this family of Tregennis very well. Indeed, upon my Cornish mother's side I could call them cousins, and their strange fate has naturally been a great shock to me. I may tell you that I had got as far as Plymouth upon my way to Africa, but the news reached me this morning, and I came straight back again to help in the inquiry."
What?
Oh.
Oh!
Cleared. Holmes raised his eyebrows.
Did you lose your boat through it?
"I will take the next."
Dear me, that is friendship indeed.
"I tell you they were relatives."
Quite so. Cousins of your mother. Was your baggage aboard the ship?
"Some of it, but the main part at the hotel."
I see. But surely this event could not have found its way into the Plymouth morning papers.
"No, sir. I had a telegram."
Might I ask from whom?
A shadow passed over the gaunt face of the explorer. "You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes."
It is my business.
With an effort, Dr. Sterndale recovered his ruffled composure. "I have no objection to telling you. It was Mr. Roundhay, the vicar, who sent me the telegram which recalled me."
Thank you. I may say in answer to your original question that I have not cleared my mind entirely on the subject of this case, but that I have every hope of reaching some conclusion. It would be premature to say more.
"Perhaps you would not mind telling me if your suspicions point in any particular direction?"
No, I can hardly say that.
"Then I have wasted my time and need not prolong my visit." The famous doctor strode out of our cottage in considerable ill humour, and within 5 minutes Holmes had followed him. I saw him no more until the evening, when he returned with a slow step and haggard face which assured me that he had made no great progress with his investigation. He glanced at a telegram which awaited him, and threw it into the grate.
From a Plymouth hotel, Watson. I learned the name of it from the vicar, and I wired to make certain that Dr. Leon Sterndale's account was true. It appears that he did indeed spend last night there, and that he has actually allowed some of his baggage to go on to Africa, while he returned to be present at this investigation. What do you make of that, Watson?
He is deeply interested.
Deeply interested, yes. There's a thread here which we have not yet grasped, and which might lead us through the tangle. Cheer up, Watson, for I am very sure that our material has not yet all come to hand. When it does, we may soon leave our difficulties behind us.
Little did I think how soon the words of Holmes would be realized, or how strange and sinister would be that new development which opened up an entirely fresh line of investigation. I was shaving at my window in the morning when I heard the rattle of hooves, and, looking up, saw a dog-cart coming at a gallop down the road. It pulled up at our door, and our friend the vicar sprang from it and rushed up our garden path. Holmes was already dressed, and we hastened down to meet him. Our visitor was so excited that he could hardly articulate, but at last, in gasps and bursts, his tragic story came out of him.
We are devil-ridden, Mr. Holmes. My poor parish is devil-ridden. Satan himself is loose in it. We are given over into his hands.
He danced about in his agitation, a ludicrous object if it were not for his ashy face and startled eyes. Finally, he shot out his terrible news.
Mr. Mortimer Tregennis died during the night and with exactly the same symptoms as the rest of his family.
Holmes sprang to his feet, all energy in an instant.
Can you fit us both in your dog cart? Yes, I can. Then, Watson, we'll postpone our breakfast. Mr. Roundhay, we are entirely at your disposal. Hurry, hurry, before things get disarranged.
The lodger occupied 2 rooms at the vicarage, which were in an angle by themselves, the one above the other. Below was a large sitting room, above his bedroom. They looked out upon a croquet lawn which came up to the windows. We had arrived before the doctor or the police, so that everything was absolutely undisturbed. Let me describe exactly the scene as we saw it upon that misty March morning. It has left an impression which can never be effaced from my mind. The atmosphere of the room was of a horrible and depressing stuffiness. The servant who had first entered had thrown up the window, or it would have been even more intolerable. This might partly be due to the fact that a lamp stood flaring and smoking on the center table. Beside it sat the dead man, leaning back in his chair, his thin beard projecting, his spectacles pushed up onto his forehead, and his lean, dark face turned towards the window and twisted into the same distortion of terror which had marked the features of his dead sister. His limbs were convulsed and his fingers contorted as though he had died in a very paroxysm of fear. He was fully clothed, though there were signs that his dressing had been done in a hurry. We had already learned that his bed had been slept in, and that the tragic end had come to him in the early morning. One realized the red-hot energy which underlay Holmes's phlegmatic exterior when one saw the sudden change which came over him from the moment that he entered the fatal apartment. In an instant he was tense and alert, his eyes shining, his face set, his limbs quivering with eager activity. He was out on the lawn, in through the window, round the room, and up into the bedroom, for all the world like a dashing foxhound drawing a cover. In the bedroom, he made a rapid cast around and ended by throwing open the window, which appeared to give him some... Sorry. Bedtime for giggles.
No, not the murder scene.
In the bedroom, he made a rapid cast around and ended by throwing open the window, which appeared to give him some fresh cause for excitement. I've never laughed at this part before.
You've never laughed at it before. Not funny. It's not funny.
It's not funny.
It's not even funny. I know you can do this. It's not funny.
A man died.
A man died.
Okay, 3 times the charm.
Mhm.
In the bedroom, he made a rapid cast around and ended by throwing open the window, which appeared to give him some fresh cause for excitement, for he leaned out of it with a loud... Oh.
We've never done this before. This is really funny. You can say it. It's not funny.
It's not funny.
It's not funny.
Oh, for he leaned out of it with loud ejaculations.
Oh,
This is ridiculous.
it's not funny. It's not
I
funny.
have to stress, for 3 weeks, I've gotten through this without laughing. It wasn't even
Not
funny,
once.
but now it's funny.
We've never laughed at this bit. It's not funny.
It's not funny.
Okay, we're not laughing.
For he leaned out of it with loud ejaculations of interest and delight. Then he rushed down the stair, out through the open window, threw himself upon his face on the lawn, sprang up and into the room once more, all with the energy of the hunter who is at the very heels of his quarry. The lamp, which was an ordinary standard, he examined with minute care, making certain measurements upon its bowl. He carefully scrutinized with his lens the talc shield which covered the top of the chimney, and scraped off some ashes which adhered to its upper surface, putting some of them into an envelope, which he placed in his pocketbook. Finally, just as the doctor and the official police put in an appearance, he beckoned to the vicar, and we all 3 went out upon the lawn.
I'm glad to say that my investigation has not been entirely barren. I cannot remain to discuss the matter with the police, but I should be exceedingly obliged, Mr. Roundhay, if you would give the inspector my compliments and direct his attention to the bedroom window and to the sitting room lamp. Each is suggestive, and together they are almost conclusive. If the police would desire further information, I shall be happy to see any of them at the cottage. And now, Watson, I think that perhaps we shall be better employed elsewhere.
It may be that the police resented the intrusion of an amateur, or that they imagined themselves to be upon some hopeful line of investigation, but it is certain that we heard nothing from them for the next 2 days. During this time, Holmes spent some of his time smoking and dreaming in the cottage, but a greater portion in country walks which he undertook alone, returning after many hours without remark as to where he had been. One experiment served to show me the line of his investigation. He had bought a lamp which was the duplicate of the one which had burned in the room of Mortimer Tregennis on the morning of the tragedy. This he filled with the same oil as that used at the vicarage, and he carefully timed the period which it would take to be exhausted. Another experiment which he made was of a more unpleasant nature, and one which I am not likely ever to forget.
You will remember, Watson, that there is a single common point of resemblance in the varying reports which have reached us. This concerns the effect of the atmosphere of the room in each case upon those who had first entered it. You will recollect that Mortimer Tregennis, in describing the episode of his last visit to his brother's house, remarked that the doctor on entering the room fell into a chair. You had forgotten? Well, I can answer for it that it was so. Now, you will remember also that Mrs. Porter, the housekeeper, told us that she herself fainted upon entering the room and had afterwards opened the window. In the second case, that of Mortimer Tregennis himself, you cannot have forgotten the horrible stuffiness of the room when we arrived, though the servant had thrown open the window. That servant, I found upon inquiry, was so ill that she had gone to her bed. You will admit, Watson, that these facts are very suggestive. In each case, there is evidence of a poisonous atmosphere. In each case also, there is combustion going on in the room. In the one case a fire, in the other a lamp. The fire was needed, but the lamp was lit, as a comparison of the oil consumed will show, long after it was broad daylight. Why? Surely because there is some connection between three things: the burning, the stuffy atmosphere, and finally, the madness or death of those unfortunate people. That is clear, is it not?
It would appear so.
At least we may accept it as a working hypothesis. We will suppose, then, that something was burned in each case which produced an atmosphere causing strange toxic effects. Very good. In the first instance, that of the Tregennis family, this substance was placed in the fire. Now, the window was shut, but the fire would naturally carry fumes to some extent up the chimney. Hence, one would expect the effects of the poison to be less than in the second case, where there was less escape for the vapour. The result seems to indicate that it was so, since in the first case only the woman, who had presumably the more sensitive organism, was killed, the others exhibiting that temporary or permanent lunacy which is evidently the first effect of the drug. In the second case, the result was complete. Facts, therefore, seem to bear out the theory of a poison which worked by combustion. With this train of reasoning in my head, I naturally looked about in Mortimer Tregennis's room to find some remains of this substance. The obvious place to look was the talc shelf or smoke guard of the lamp. There, sure enough, I perceived a number of flaky ashes, and round the edges a fringe of brownish powder, which had not yet been consumed. Half of this I took, as you saw, and placed it in an envelope.
Why half, Holmes?
It is not for me, my dear Watson, to stand in the way of the official police force. I leave them all the evidence which I found. The poison still had remained upon the talc had they the wit to find it. Now, Watson, we will light our lamp. We will, however, take the precaution to open our window to avoid the premature decease of two deserving members of society, and you will seat yourself near that open window in an armchair, unless, like a sensible man, you determine to have nothing to do with the affair. Oh, you will see it out, will you? I thought I knew my Watson. This chair I will place opposite yours, so that we may be the same distance from the poison and face to face. The door we will leave ajar. Each is now in a position to watch the other and to bring the experiment to an end should the symptoms seem alarming. Is that all clear? Well then, I take our powder, or what remains of it, from the envelope and lay it above the burning lamp. So. Now, Watson, let us sit down and await developments.
They were not long in coming. I had hardly settled in my chair before I was conscious of a thick, musky odor, subtle and nauseous. At the very first whiff of it, my brain and my imagination were beyond all control. A thick black cloud swirled before my eyes, and my mind told me that in this cloud, unseen as yet, but about to spring out upon my appalled senses, lurked all that was vaguely horrible, all that was monstrous and inconceivably wicked in the universe. Vague shapes swirled and swam amid the dark cloud bank, each a menace and a warning of something coming, the advent of some unspeakable dweller upon the threshold, whose very shadow would blast my soul. A freezing horror took possession of me. I felt that my hair was rising, that my eyes were protruding, that my mouth was opened, and my tongue like leather. The turmoil within my brain was such that something must surely snap. I tried to scream, and was vaguely aware of some hoarse croak, which was my own voice, but distant and detached from myself. At the same moment, in some effort of escape, I broke through that cloud of despair and had a glimpse of Holmes's face, white, rigid, and drawn with horror. The very look which I had seen upon the features of the dead. It was that vision which gave me an instant of sanity and of strength. I dashed from my chair, threw my arms around Holmes, and together we lurched through the door, and an instant afterwards had thrown ourselves down upon the grass plot and were lying side by side, conscious only of the glorious sunshine which was bursting its way through the hellish cloud of terror which had girt us in. Slowly it rose from our souls like the mists from a landscape, until peace and reason had returned, and we were sitting upon the grass, wiping our clammy foreheads, and looking with apprehension at each other to mark the last traces of that terrific experience which we had undergone.
Upon my word, Watson, I owe you both my thanks and an apology. It was an unjustifiable What if I killed everyone? It was an unjustifiable experiment even for oneself, and doubly so for a friend. I am really very sorry.
I answered with some emotion, for I have never seen so much of Holmes's heart before. You know that it is my greatest joy and privilege to help you. He relapsed at once into the half-humorous, half-cynical vein which was his habitual attitude to those about him.
It would be superfluous to drive us mad, my dear Watson. A candid observer would certainly declare that we were so already before we embarked on so wild an experiment. I confess that I never imagined that the effects could be so sudden and so severe.
He dashed into the cottage, and, reappearing with the burning lamp held at full arm's length, he threw it among a bank of brambles.
We must give the room a little time to clear. I take it, Watson, that you have no longer a shadow of a doubt as to how these tragedies were produced.
None whatever.
But the cause remains as obscure as before. Come to the arbor here and let us discuss it together. That villainous stuff seems still to linger round my throat. I think we must admit that all the evidence points to this man, Mortimer Tregennis, having been the criminal in the first tragedy, though he was the victim in the second one. We must remember, in the first place, that there is some story of a family quarrel, followed by a reconciliation. How bitter that quarrel may have been, or how hollow the reconciliation, we cannot tell. When I think of Mortimer Tregennis, with the foxy face and the small, shrewd, beady eyes behind the spectacles, he is not a man whom I should judge to be of a particularly forgiving disposition. Well, in the next place, you will remember this idea of someone moving in the garden, which took our attention for a moment from the real cause of the tragedy, emanated from him. He had a motive in misleading us. Finally, if he did not throw the substance into the fire at the moment of leaving the room, who did do so? The affair happened immediately after his departure. Had anyone else come in, the family would certainly have risen from the table. Besides, in peaceful Cornwall, visitors did not arrive after 10 o'clock at night. We may take it, then, that all the evidence points to Mortimer Tregennis as the culprit.
Then his own death was suicide.
Well, Watson, it is on the face of it a not impossible supposition. The man who had the guilt upon his soul, having brought such a fate upon his own family, might well be driven by remorse to inflict it upon himself. There are, however, some cogent reasons against it. Fortunately, there is one man in England who knows all about it, and I have made arrangements by which we shall hear the facts this afternoon from his own lips. He's a little before his time. Perhaps you would kindly step this way, Dr. Leon Sterndale. We have been conducting a chemical experiment indoors which has left our little room hardly fit for the reception of so distinguished a visitor.
I had heard the click of the garden gate, and now the majestic figure of the great African explorer appeared upon the path. He turned in some surprise towards the rustic arbour in which we sat. "You sent for me, Holmes. I had your note about an hour ago, and I have come, though I really do not know why I should obey your summons."
Perhaps we can clear the point up before we separate. Meanwhile, I am much obliged to you for your courteous acquiescence. You will excuse this informal reception in the open air, but my friend Watson and I have nearly furnished an additional chapter to what the papers called Cornish horror, and we prefer a clear atmosphere for the present. Perhaps, since the matters which we have to discuss will affect you personally in a very intimate fashion, it is as well that we should talk where there can be no eavesdropping.
The explorer took his cigar from his lips and gazed sternly at my companion. I am at a loss to know, sir, what you can have to speak about which affects me personally in a very intimate fashion.
The killing of Mortimer Tregennis.
For a moment I wished that I were armed. Sterndale's fierce face turned to a dusky red, his eyes glared, and the knotted, passionate veins started out in his forehead, while he sprang forward with clenched hands towards my companion. Then he stopped, and with a violent effort he resumed a cold, rigid calmness, which was perhaps more suggestive of danger than his hot-headed outburst. I have lived so long among savages and beyond the law that I have got into the way of being a law to myself. You would do well, Mr. Holmes, not to forget it, for I have no desire to do you an injury.
Nor have I any desire to do you an injury, Dr. Sterndale. Surely the clearest proof of it is that, knowing what I know, I have sent for you and not for the police.
Sterndale sat down with a gasp, overawed for perhaps the first time in his adventurous life. There was a calm assurance of power in Holmes's manner which could not be withstood. Our visitor stammered for a moment, his great hands opening and shutting in his agitation. What do you mean? If this is bluff upon your part, Mr. Holmes, you have chosen a bad man for your experiment. Let us have no more beating about the bush. What do you mean?
I'll tell you, and the reason why I tell you is that I hope frankness may beget frankness. What my next step may be will depend entirely upon the nature of your own defense.
My defense?
Yes, sir.
My defense against what?
Against the charge of killing Mortimer Tregennis.
Sterndale mopped his forehead with his handkerchief. Upon my word, you are getting on. Do all your successes depend upon this prodigious power of bluff?
The bluff is upon your side, Dr. Leon Sterndale, and not upon mine. As a proof, I will tell you some of the facts upon which my conclusions are based. Of your return from Plymouth, allowing much of your property to go on to Africa, I will say nothing save that it first informed me that you were one of the factors which had to be taken into account in reconstructing this drama.
I came back.
I have heard your reasons and regard them as unconvincing and inadequate. We will pass that. You came down here to ask me whom I suspected. I refused to answer you. You then went to the vicarage, waited outside for some time, and finally returned to your cottage.
How do you know that?
I followed you.
I saw no one.
That is what you may expect to see when I follow you. You spent a restless night at your cottage, and you formed certain plans, which, in the early morning, you proceeded to put into execution. Leaving your door just as day was breaking, you filled your pocket with some reddish gravel that was lying heaped beside your gate.
Sterndale gave a violent start and looked at Holmes in amazement.
You then walked swiftly for the mile which separated you from the vicarage. You were wearing, I may remark, the same pair of ribbed tennis shoes which are at the present moment upon your feet. At the vicarage, you passed through the orchard and the side hedge, coming out under the window of the lodge of Tregennis. It was now daylight, but the household was not yet stirring. You drew some of the gravel from your pocket and you threw it up at the window above you.
Sterndale sprang to his feet. I believe that you are the devil himself. Holmes smiled at the compliment.
It took 2, or possibly 3, handfuls before the lodger came down to the window. You beckoned him to come down. He dressed hurriedly and descended to his sitting room. You entered by the window. There was an interview, a short one, during which you walked up and down the room. Then you passed out and closed the window, standing on the lawn outside smoking a cigar and watching what occurred. Finally, after the death of Tregennis, you withdrew as you had come. Now, Dr. Sterndale, how do you justify such conduct, and what were the motives for your actions? If you prevaricate or trifle with me, I give you my assurance that the matter will pass out of my hands forever.
Our visitor's face had turned ashen grey as he listened to the words of his accuser. Now he sat for some time in thought, with his face sunk in his hands. Then, with a sudden, impulsive gesture, he plucked a photograph from his breast pocket and threw it on the rustic table before us. That is why I have done it. It showed the bust and face of a very beautiful woman. Holmes stooped over it.
Brenda Tregennis.
Yes, Brenda Tregennis. For years I have loved her. For years she has loved me. There is the secret of that Cornish seclusion which people have marveled at. It has brought me close to the one thing on earth that was dear to me. I could not marry her, for I have a wife who has left me for years, and yet whom, by the deplorable laws of England, I could not divorce. For years Brenda waited. For years I waited. And this is what we have waited for. A terrible sob shook his great frame, and he clutched his throat under his brindled beard. Then with an effort he mastered himself and spoke on. The vicar knew. He was in our confidence. He would tell you that she was an angel upon earth. That was why he telegraphed to me and I returned. What was my baggage or Africa to me when I learned that such a fate had come upon my darling? There you have the missing clue to my action, Mr. Holmes.
Proceed.
Dr. Sterndale drew from his pocket a paper packet and laid it upon the table. On the outside was written Radix Pedis Diaboli, with a red poison label beneath it. He pushed it towards me. I understand that you are a doctor, sir. Have you ever heard of this preparation? Devil's foot root. No, I have never heard of it. It is no reflection upon your professional knowledge, for I believe that, save for one sample in a laboratory at Buda, there is no other specimen in Europe. It has not yet found its way either into the pharmacopoeia or into the literature of toxicology. The root is shaped like a foot, half human, half goat-like, hence the fanciful name given by a botanical missionary. It is used as an ordeal poison by the medicine men in certain districts of West Africa, and is kept as a secret among them. This particular specimen I obtained under very extraordinary circumstances in the Ubangi country. He opened the paper as he spoke and disclosed a heap of reddish-brown snuff-like powder.
Well, sir?
I am about to tell you, Mr. Holmes, all that actually occurred, for you already know so much that it is clearly to my interest that you should know all. I have already explained the relationship in which I stood to the Tregennis family. For the sake of the sister, I was friendly with the brothers. There was a family quarrel about money which estranged this man Mortimer, but it was supposed to be made up, and I afterwards met him as I did the others. He was a sly, subtle, scheming man, and several things arose which gave me a suspicion of him, but I had no cause for any positive quarrel. One day, only a couple of weeks ago, he came down to my cottage and I showed him some of my African curiosities. Among other things, I exhibited this powder, and I told him of its strange properties, how it stimulates those brain centers which control the emotion of fear, and how either madness or death is the fate of the unhappy native who is subjected to the ordeal by the priest of his tribe. I told him, also, how powerless European science would be to detect it. How he took it I cannot say, for I never left the room, but there is no doubt that it was then, while I was opening cabinets and stooping to boxes, that he managed to abstract some of the devil's foot root. I well remember how he plied me with questions as to the amount and the time that was needed for its effect, but I little dreamed that he could have a personal reason for asking. I thought no more of the matter until the vicar's telegram reached me at Plymouth. This villain had thought that I would be at sea before the news could reach me, and that I should be lost for years in Africa. But I returned at once. Of course, I could not listen to the details without feeling assured that my poison had been used. I came round to see you on the chance that some other explanation had suggested itself to you, but there could be none. I was convinced that Mortimer Tregennis was the murderer, that for the sake of money, and with the idea, perhaps, that if the other members of his family were all insane, he would be the sole guardian of their joint property, he had used the devil's foot powder upon them, driven 2 of them out of their senses, and killed his sister Brenda, the one human being whom I have ever loved, who has ever loved me. There was his crime. What was to be his punishment? Should I appeal to the law? Where were my proofs? I knew that the facts were true, but could I hope to make a jury of countrymen believe so fantastic a story? I might, or I might not, but I could not afford to fail. My soul cried out for revenge. I have said to you once before, Mr. Holmes, that I have spent much of my life outside the law, and that I have come at last to be a law to myself. So it was even now. I determined that the fate which he had given to others should be shared by himself. Either that, or I would do justice upon him with my own hand. In all England, there could be no man who sets less value upon his own life than I do at the present moment. Now I have told you all. You have yourself supplied the rest. I did, as you say, after a restless night, set off early from my cottage. I foresaw the difficulty of arousing him, so I gathered some gravel from the pile which you have mentioned, and I used it to throw up to his window. He came down and admitted me through the window of the sitting room. I laid his offence before him. I told him that I had come both as judge and executioner. The wretch sank into a chair, paralyzed at the sight of my revolver. I lit the lamp, put the powder above it, and stood outside the window, ready to carry out my threat to shoot him should he try to leave the room. In 5 minutes he died. My God, how he died! But my heart was flint, for he endured nothing which my innocent darling had not felt before him. There is my story, Mr. Holmes. Perhaps, if you loved a woman, you would have done as much yourself. At any rate, I am in your hands. You can take what steps you like. As I have already said, there is no man living who can fear death less than I do. Holmes sat for some little time in silence.
What were your plans?
I had intended to bury myself in Central Africa. My work there is but half finished.
Go and do the other half. I, at least, am not prepared to prevent you.
Dr. Sterndale raised his giant figure, bowed gravely, and walked from the arbor. Holmes lit his pipe and handed me his pouch.
Some fumes which are not poisonous would be a welcome change. I think you must agree, Watson, that it is not a case in which we are called upon to interfere. Our investigation has been independent, and our actions shall be so also. You would not denounce the man.
Certainly not.
I have never loved Watson, but if I did, and if the woman I loved had met such an end, I might act even as our lawless lion hunter has done. Who knows? Well, Watson, I will not offend your intelligence by explaining what is obvious. The gravel upon the windowsill was, of course, the starting point of my research. It was unlike anything in the vicarage garden. Only when my attention had been drawn to Dr. Sterndale and his cottage did I find its counterpart. The lamp shining in broad daylight and the remains of the powder upon the shield were successive links in a fairly obvious chain. And now, my dear Watson, I think we may dismiss the matter from our mind and go back with a clear conscience to the study of those Chaldean roots, which is surely to be traced in the Cornish branch of the great Celtic speech.
Ah!
Woo! Ah!
Yeah.
So that was The Adventure of the Devil's Foot. Did you like it? Did everyone like it?
Never like
Yeah,
it.
fun. Ah, we did it. We're so brave.
Hi, Shiny, also.
Hi, Shiny, by the way. Yay!
Woo.
Woo! Yeah, you missed the exciting bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. The art fucking rules. It's by Bob. Giant dash goldfish on Tumblr. Smile. Yeah, little recap for anyone who missed the start of the stream. This is, in celebration of, today being 69 days until, finally, Sherlock Holmes will be fully public domain and will be allowed to respect women.
Yeah, woo.
Yahoo! And I think that now we take a little sippy break, okay?
Yeah, we're
Everyone
gonna
take a
have a little break. I don't know, like 5-10 minutes.
Mhm. Welcome back, everyone! Oh, hope everyone enjoyed their break. I choked on a cookie.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so much for recovering my voice. Oh, it was a good cookie.
Yeah.
I also did deplete a good amount of my water supply in choking on the cookie.
Oh, shit. You want
It's
to go
okay,
refill it? Or...
No, I got enough.
Okay.
I enjoyed a snack of eucalyptus drops, which, with the help of my mama, had kind of been crushed to a powder. I was too scared to do it, and so she put the bag on the bench and smashed a chopping board on top of it.
Too scared. It's fun to bash it.
No, it's so loud and scary to bash it.
Okay.
You don't know anything about the world.
True.
Scary out there, man.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, yeah. There's Sherlock Holmes to do.
There's Sherlock Holmes to do. Is everyone ready? Is everyone cozy? You got back in bed? And comfortable?
You better get fucking comfortable.
You better get fucking but not too comfortable.
Well, you're allowed to fall asleep. It's bedtime stories.
I guess you're allowed to fall asleep if it's a bedtime story. Yeah,
but you'll probably miss the who's the culprit.
Yeah. And then what, you know? Anyway, I was gonna say something else, but sorry, I had to lean away from the mic to hiccup. Anyway.
Oh shit, Scout.
Oh my god, Scout Betty bye. That's crazy.
We better hurry so Scout can go sleep.
Yeah, we'll do it so quick.
Oh, cookies.
Cookies, yes, have fun. If everyone's ready and comfy, I think we can get started with the adventure of the 3 Garadebs.
Yahoo!
Yahoo!
If you're not comfy, you're not allowed to listen. Unless you're baking cookies, which I guess is not necessarily comfortable.
Yeah. You will be comfortable. It's a future comfort.
Yeah.
Coochie and milk before bed.
Exactly. Yeah, just what everyone needs.
Mhm.
This doesn't have any coochie in it, though.
Well, no, I don't know why I said well.
Okay. It may have been a comedy, or it may have been a tragedy. It cost one man his reason, it cost me a bloodletting, and it cost yet another man the penalties? The penalties of the law. It cost yet another man the penis.
No, his penis.
Yet there was certainly an element of comedy. Well, you shall judge for yourselves. I remember the date very well, for it was the same month that Holmes refused a knighthood for services which may perhaps some day be described. I only refer to the matter in passing, for in my position of partner and confidant, I am obliged to be particularly careful to avoid any indiscretion. I repeat, however, that this enables me to fix the date, which was the latter end of June 1902, shortly after the conclusion of the South African War. Holmes had spent several days in bed, as was his habit from time to time, but he emerged that morning with a long foolscap document in his hand and a twinkle of amusement in his austere grey eyes.
There's a chance for you to make some money, friend Watson. Have you ever heard the name of Garadeb?
I admitted that I had not.
Well, if you can lay your hand upon a Garadeb, there's money in it.
Why?
That's a long story. Rather whimsical one, too. I don't think in all our explorations of human complexities we have ever come upon anything more singular. The fellow will be here presently for cross-examination, so I won't open up the matter until he comes, but meanwhile, that's the name we want.
The telephone directory lay on the table beside me, and I turned over the pages in a rather hopeless quest. But to my amazement, there was the strange name in its due place. I gave a cry of triumph. Here you are, Holmes. Here it is. Holmes took the book from my hand.
Yeah. What if I exploded everything on the planet all at once? I think that would be awesome. Anyway, Sherlock Holmes wouldn't do this. Garadeb N. 136 Little Rider Street, West. Sorry to disappoint you, my dear Watson, but this is the man himself. That is the address upon his letter. We want another to match him.
Mrs. Hudson had come in with a card upon a tray. I took it up and glanced at it. Why, here it is. This is a different initial. John Garadeb, Counselor at Law, Moreville, Kansas, USA. Holmes smiled as he looked at the card.
I am afraid you must make yet another effort, Watson. This gentleman is also in the plot already, though I certainly did not expect to see him this morning. However, he is in a position to tell us a good deal which I want to know.
A moment later, he was in the room. Mr. John Garadeb, Counselor at Law, was a short, powerful man with a round, fresh, clean-shaven face characteristic of so many American men of affairs. The general effect was chubby and rather childlike, so that one received the impression of quite a young man with a broad-set smile upon his face. His eyes, however, were arresting. Seldom in any human head have I seen a pair which bespoke a more intense inward life. So bright were they, so alert, so responsive to every change of thought. His accent was American, but was not accompanied by any eccentricity of speech. Mr. Holmes? Ah, yes. Your pictures are not unlike you, sir, if I may say so. I believe you have had a letter from my namesake, Mr. Nathan Garadeb, have you not?
Pray sit down. We shall, I fancy, have a good deal to discuss. You are, of course, the Mr. John Garadeb mentioned in this document, but surely you have been in England some time.
Why do you say that, Mr. Holmes? I seem to read sudden suspicion in those expressive eyes.
Your whole outfit is English.
I've read of your tricks, Mr. Holmes, but I never thought I would be the subject of them. Where do you read that?
The shoulder cut of your coat, the toes of your boots, could anyone doubt it?
Well, well, I had no idea I was so obvious a Britisher. But business brought me over here some time ago, and so, as you say, my outfit is nearly all London. However, I guess your time is of value, and we did not meet to talk about the cut of my socks. What about getting down to that paper you hold in your hand? Holmes had in some way ruffled our visitor, whose chubby face had assumed a far less amiable expression.
Patience, Mr. Garadeb. Dr. Watson would tell you that these little digressions of mine sometimes proved in the end to have some bearing on the matter. But why did Mr. Nathan Garadeb not come with you?
Why did he ever drag you into it at all? What in thunder had you to do with it? Here was a bit of professional business between two gentlemen, and one of them must needs call in a detective. I saw him this morning, and he told me this fool trick he had played me, and that's why I'm here. But I feel bad about it all the same.
There was no reflection upon you, Mr. Garadeb. It was simply zeal upon his part to gain your end. An end which is, I understand, equally vital for both of you. He knows that I have means of getting information, and therefore it was very natural that he should apply to me.
Our visitor's angry face gradually cleared. Oh, that puts it different. When I went to see him this morning, and he told me he'd sent to a detective, I just asked for your address and came right away. I don't want police butting into a private matter. But if you're content just to help us find the man, there can be no harm in that.
Well, that is just how it stands. And now, sir, since you are here, we had best have a clear account from your own lips. My friend here knows nothing of the details.
Mr. Garadeb surveyed me with not too friendly a gaze. Need he know?
We usually work together.
Well, there's no reason it should be kept a secret. I'll give you the facts as short as I can make 'em. If you came from Kansas, I would not need to explain to you who Alexander Hamilton Garadeb was. He made his money in real estate, and afterwards in the wheat pit at Chicago, but he spent it in buying up as much land as would make one of your counties, lying along the Arkansas River west of Fort Dodge. It's grazing land and lumber land and arable land and mineralized land, and just every sort of land that brings dollars to the man that owns it. He had no kith nor kin, or if he had, I never heard of it, but he took a kind of pride in the queerness of his name. That was what brought us together. I was in the law at Topeka, and one day I had a visit from the old man, and he was tickled to death to meet another man with his own name. It was his pet fad, and he was dead set to find out if there were any more Garadebs in the world. Find me another, said he. I told him I was a busy man, and could not spend my life hiking round the world in search of Garadebs. Nonetheless, said he, that is just what you will do if things pan out as I plan them. I thought he was joking, but there was a powerful lot of meaning in the words, as I was soon to discover. For he died within a year of saying them, and he left a will behind him. It was the queerest will that has ever been filed in the state of Kansas. His property was divided into 3 parts, and I was to have one on condition that I found 2 Garridebs who would share the remainder. It's $5 million for each if it is a sin, but we can't lay a finger on it until we all 3 stand in a row. It was so big a chance that I just let my legal practice slide, and I set forth looking for Garridebs. There is not one in the United States. I went through it, sir, with a fine-toothed comb, and never a Garrideb could I catch. Then I tried the old country. Sure enough, there was the name in the London telephone directory. Sorry. I went after him 2 days ago and explained the whole matter to him. But he's a lone man like myself, with some women relations, but no men. It says 3 adult men in the will. So you see, we still have a vacancy, and if you can help to fill it, we will be very ready to pay your charges.
Well, Watson, I said it was rather whimsical, did I not? I should have thought, sir, that your obvious way was to advertise in the agony columns of the papers.
I have done that, Mr. Holmes. No replies.
Dear me. Well, it is certainly a most curious little problem. I may take a glance at it in my leisure. By the way, it is curious that you should come from Topeka. I used to have a correspondent. He is dead now. Old Dr. Lysander Starr, who was mayor in 1890.
Good old Dr. Starr. His name is still honored. Well, Mr. Holmes, I suppose all we can do is to report to you and let you know how we progress. I reckon you'll hear within a day or 2. With this assurance, our American bowed and departed. Holmes had lit his pipe, and he sat for some time with a curious smile upon his face. Well?
I am wondering, Watson. Just wondering.
At what? Sorry. Holmes took his pipe from his lips.
I was wondering, Watson, what on earth could be the object of this man in telling us such a rigmarole of lies? I nearly asked him so, for there are times when a brutal frontal attack is the best policy, but I judged it better to let him think he had fooled us. Here is a man with an English coat frayed at the elbow and trousers bagged at the knee with a year's wear, and yet by this document and by his own account he is a provincial American lately landed in London. There have been no advertisements in the agony columns. You know that I miss nothing there. They are my favourite cupboard putting up a bird, and I would never have overlooked such a cock pheasant as that. I never knew a Dr. Lysander Starr of Topeka. Touch him where you would, he was false. I think the fellow really is an American, but he has worn his accent smooth with years of London. What is his game, then? And what motive lies behind his preposterous search for Garridebs? It's worth our attention, for, granting that the man is a rascal, he is certainly a complex and ingenious one. We must now find out if our other correspondent is a fraud also. Just bring him up, Watson.
I did so, and heard a thin, quavering voice at the other end of the line.
Yes, I am Mr. Nathan Garrideb. Is Mr. Holmes there? I should very much like to have a word with Mr. Holmes.
My friend took the instrument, and I heard the usual syncopated dialogue.
Yes, he has been here. I understand that you don't know him. How long? Only 2 days. Yes, of course, it is a most captivating prospect. Will you be at home this evening? I suppose your namesake will not be there? Very good, we will come then, for I would rather have a chat without him. Dr. Watson will come with me. I understand from your note that you do not go out often. Well, we shall be round about 6. You need not mention it to the American lawyer. Very good. Goodbye.
It was twilight of a lovely spring evening, and even Little Ryder Street, one of the smaller offshoots from the Edgware Road, within a stone cast of old Tyburn tree of evil memory, looked golden and wonderful in the slanting rays of the setting sun. The particular house to which we were directed was a large, old-fashioned, early Georgian edifice, with a flat brick face broken only by 2 deep bay windows on the ground floor. It was on this ground floor that our client lived, and indeed the low windows proved to be the front of the huge room in which he spent his waking hours. Holmes pointed as we passed to the small brass plate which bore the curious name.
Some years, Watson. It's his real name, anyhow, and that is something to note.
The house had a common stair, and there were a number of names painted in the hall, some indicating offices and some private chambers. It was not a collection of residential flats, but rather the abode of bohemian bachelors. Our client opened the door for us himself, and apologized by saying that the woman in charge left at 4 o'clock. Mr. Nathan Garadeb proved to be a very tall, loose-jointed, round-backed person, gaunt and bald, some 60-odd years of age. He had a cadaverous face, with the dull, dead skin of a man to whom exercise was unknown. Large round spectacles and a small projecting goat's beard combined with his stooping attitude to give him an expression of peering curiosity. The general effect, however, was amiable, though eccentric. The room was as curious as its occupant. It looked like a small museum. It was both broad and deep, with cupboards and cabinets all round, crowded with specimens, geological and anatomical. Cases of butterflies and moths flanked each side of the entrance. A large table in the center was littered with all sorts of debris, while the tall brass tube of a powerful microscope bristled up among them. As I glanced round, I was surprised at the universality of the man's interests. Here was a case of ancient coins. There was a cabinet of flint instruments. Behind his central table was a large cupboard of fossil bones. Above was a line of plaster skulls with such names as Neanderthal, Heidelberg, Cro-Magnon printed beneath them. It was clear that he was a student of many subjects. As he stood in front of us now, he held a piece of chamois leather in his right hand with which he was polishing a coin.
Syracusan of the best period. They degenerated greatly towards the end. At their best, I hold them supreme, though some prefer the Alexandrian school. You'll find a chair here, Mr. Holmes. Pray allow me to clear these bones. And you, sir. Ah, yes, Dr. Watson, if you would have the goodness to put the Japanese vase to one side. You see round me my little interests in life. My Dr. Meh lectures me about never going out, but why should I go out when I have so much to hold me here? I can assure you that the adequate cataloguing of one of those cabinets would take me 3 good months.
Holmes looked round him with curiosity.
But do you tell me that you never go out? Now and again I drive down to Sotheby's or Christie's. Otherwise I very seldom leave my room. I am not too strong, and my researches are very absorbing. But you can imagine, Mr. Holmes, what a terrific shock, pleasant but terrific it was for me when I heard of this unparalleled good fortune. It only needs one more Garadeb to complete the matter, and surely we can find one. I had a brother, but he is dead, and female relatives are disqualified. But there must surely be others in the world. I had heard that you handled strange cases, and that was why I said to you. Of course, this American gentleman is quite right, and I should have taken his advice first, but I acted for the best. I think you acted very wisely indeed. But are you really anxious to acquire an estate in America? Certainly not, sir. Nothing would induce me to leave my collection, but this gentleman has assured me that he will buy me out as soon as we have established our claim. $5 million was the sum named. There are a dozen specimens in the market at the present moment which fill gaps in my collection, and which I am unable to purchase for want of a few £100. Just think what I could do with $5 million. Why, I have the nucleus of a national collection. I shall be the Hans Sloane of my age.
His eyes gleamed behind his great spectacles. It was very clear that no pains would be spared by Mr. Nathan Garadeb in finding a namesake.
I merely called to make your acquaintance, and there is no reason why I should interrupt your studies. I prefer to establish personal touch with those with whom I do business. There are few questions I need ask, for I have your very clear narrative in my pocket, and I filled up the blanks when this American gentleman called. I understand that up to this week you were unaware of his existence. That is so. He called last Tuesday. Did he tell you of our interview today? Yes, he came straight back to me. He'd been very angry. Why should he be angry? He seemed to think it was some reflection on his honor, but he was quite cheerful again when he returned. Did he suggest any course of action? No, sir, he did not. Has he had or asked for any money from you? No, sir, never. You see no possible object he has in view? None, except what he states. Did you tell him of our telephone appointment? Yes, sir, I did.
Holmes was lost in thought. I could see that he was puzzled.
Have you any articles of great value in your collection? No, sir, I am not a rich man. It is a good collection, but not a very valuable one. You have no fear of burglars? Not the least. How long have you been in these rooms? Nearly 5 years.
Holmes's cross-examination was interrupted by an imperative knocking at the door. No sooner had our client unlatched it than the American lawyer burst excitedly into the room. "Here you are. I thought I should be in time to get you. Mr. Nathan Garrideb, my congratulations. You're a rich man, sir. Our business is happily finished and all is well. As to you, Mr. Holmes, we can only say we're sorry if we have given you any useless trouble." He handed over the paper to our client, who stood staring at a marked advertisement. Holmes and I leaned forward and read it over his shoulder. This is how it ran. Howard Garrideb, constructor of agricultural machinery. Binders, reapers, steam-in-hand plows, drills, harrows, farmers' carts, buckboards, and all other appliances. Estimates for artesian wells. Apply Grosvenor Buildings, Aston.
Glorious! That makes our third man.
I had opened up inquiries in Birmingham, and my agent there has sent me this advertisement from a local paper. We must hustle and put the thing through. I have written to this man and told him that you will see him in his office tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock.
You want me to see him?
What do you say, Mr. Holmes? Don't you think it would be wiser? Here am I, a wandering American with a wonderful tale. Why should he believe what I tell him? But you are a Britisher with solid references, and he's bound to take notice of what you say. I would go with you if you wished, but I have a very busy day tomorrow, and I could always follow you if you're in any trouble.
Well, I have not made such a journey for years.
It is nothing, Mr. Garrideb. I have figured out our connections. You leave at 12, and should be there soon after 2. Then you can be back the same night. All you have to do is see this man, explain the matter, and get an affidavit of his existence. By the Lord! Considering I've come all the way from the center of America, it is surely little enough if you go 100 miles in order to put this matter through.
Quite so. I think what this gentleman says is very true.
Mr. Nathan Garrideb shrugged his shoulders with a disconsolate air.
Well, if you insist, I shall go. It is certainly hard for me to refuse you anything, considering the glory of hope that you have brought into my life. Then, that is agreed, and no doubt you will let me have a report as soon as you can.
I'll see to that. Well, I'll have to get on. I'll call tomorrow, Mr. Nathan, and see you off to Birmingham. Coming my way, Mr. Holmes? Well then, goodbye, and we may have good news for you tomorrow night. I noticed that my friend's face cleared when the American left the room, and the look of thoughtful perplexity had vanished.
I wish I could look over your collection, Mr. Garrideb. In my profession, all sorts of odd knowledge comes useful, and this room of yours is a storehouse of it.
Our client shone with pleasure, and his eyes gleamed from behind his big glasses.
I had always heard, sir, that you were a very intelligent man. I could take you round now if you have the time. Unfortunately, I have not, but these specimens are so well labelled and classified that they hardly need your personal explanation. If I should be able to look in tomorrow, I presume that there would be no objection to my glancing over them. None at all. You are most welcome. The place will, of course, be shut up, but Mrs. Saunders is in the basement up to 4 o'clock, and would let you in with her key. Well, I happen to be clear tomorrow afternoon. If you would say a word to Mrs. Saunders, it would be quite in order. By the way, who was your house agent?
Our client was amazed at the sudden question.
Holloway and Steele in the Edgware Road, but why? I am a bit of an archaeologist myself when it comes to houses. I was wondering if this was Queen Anne or Georgian. Georgian, beyond doubt. Really, I should have thought a little earlier. However, it is easily ascertained. Well, goodbye, Mr. Garrideb, and may you have every success in your Birmingham journey.
The house agent's was close by, but we found that it was closed for the day, so we made our way back to Baker Street. It was not till after dinner that Holmes reverted to the subject.
A little problem draws to a close. No doubt you have outlined the solution in your own mind.
I can make neither head nor tail of it.
The head is surely clear enough, and the tail we should see tomorrow. Did you notice nothing curious about that advertisement?
I saw that the word plough was misspelt.
Oh, you did notice that, did you? Come, Watson, you improve all the time. Yes, it was bad English, but good American. The printer had set it up as received. And the buckboards, that is American also, and the artesian wells are commoner with them than with us. It was a typical American advertisement, but purporting to be from an English firm. What do you make of that?
I can only suppose that this American lawyer put it in himself. What his object was, I fail to understand.
Well, there are alternative explanations. Anyhow, he wanted to get this good old fossil up to Birmingham. That is very clear. I might have told him that he was clearly going on a wild goose chase, but on second thoughts, it seemed better to clear the stage by letting him go. Tomorrow, Watson? Well, tomorrow will speak for itself.
Holmes was up and out early. When he returned at lunchtime, I noticed that his face was very grave.
This is a more serious matter than I expected, Watson. It is fair to tell you so, though I know it will only be an additional reason to you for running your head into danger. I should know my Watson by now. But there is danger, and you should know it.
Well, it is not the first we have shared, Holmes. I hope it may not be the last. What is the particular danger this time?
We are up against a very hard case. I have identified Mr. John Garadeb, Counsellor at Law. He is none other than Killer Evans of sinister and murderous reputation.
I fear I am none the wiser.
It is not part of your profession to carry about a portable Newgate calendar in your memory. I have been down to see friend Lestrade at the Yard. There may be an occasional want of imaginative intuition down there, but they lead the world for thoroughness and method. I had an idea that we might get on the track of our American friend in their records. Sure enough, I found his chubby face smiling up at me from the Rogues Portrait Gallery. James Winter, alias Moorcroft, alias Killer Evans, was the inscription below. I scribbled down a few points from his dossier. Aged 44, native of Chicago, known to have shot 3 men in the States, escaped from penitentiary through political influence, came to London in 1893, shot a man over cards in a nightclub in the Waterloo Road in January 19... Nope, I did it! I told myself I wouldn't!
Why?
It's 100 years too late, bud. Came to London in 1893, shot a man over cards in a nightclub in the Waterloo Road in January 1895. Man died, but he was shown to have been the aggressor in the row. Dead man was identified as Roger Prescott, famous as forger and coiner in Chicago. Killer Evans, released in 1901. Has been under police supervision since, but so far as known has led an honest life. Very dangerous man, usually carries arms and is prepared to use them. That is our bird, Watson, a sporting bird, as you must admit.
But what is his game?
Well, it begins to define itself. I have been to the house agents. Our client, as he told us, has been there 5 years. It was unlet for a year before then. The previous tenant was a gentleman at large named Waldron. Waldron's appearance was well remembered at the office. He had suddenly vanished and nothing more been heard of him. He was a tall, bearded man with very dark features. Now, Prescott, the man whom Killer Evans had shot, was, according to Scotland Yard, a tall, dark man with a beard. As a working hypothesis, I think we may take it that Prescott, the American criminal, used to live in the very room which our innocent friend now devotes to his museum. So, at last we get a link, you see.
And the next link?
Well, we must go now and look for that.
He took a revolver from the drawer and handed it to me.
I have my old favourite with me. If our Wild West friend tries to live up to his nickname, we must be ready for him. I'll give you an hour for a siesta, Watson, and then I think it will be time for our Ryder Street adventure.
It was just 4 o'clock when we reached the curious apartment of Nathan Garadeb. Mrs. Saunders, the caretaker, was about to leave, but she had no hesitation in admitting us, for the door shut with a spring lock, and Holmes promised to see that all was safe before we left. Shortly afterwards, the outer door closed, her bonnet past the bow window, and we knew that we were alone in the lower floor of the house. Holmes made a rapid examination of the premises. There was one cupboard in a dark corner which stood out a little from the wall. It was behind this that we eventually crouched, while Holmes in a whisper outlined his intentions.
You wanted to get our amiable friend out of his room. That is very clear, and as the collector never went out, it took some planning to do it. The whole of this Garadeb adventure was apparently for no other end. I must say, Watson, that there is a certain devilish ingenuity about it. Even if the queer name of the tenant did give him an opening which he could hardly have expected, he wove his plot with remarkable cunning.
But what did he want?
Well, that is what we are here to find out. It has nothing whatever to do with our client, so far as I can read the situation. It is something connected with the man he murdered, the man who may have been his confederate in crime. There is some guilty secret in the room. That is how I read it. At first I thought our friend might have something in his collection more valuable than he knew, something worth the attention of a big criminal, but the fact that Roger Prescott of evil memory inhabited these rooms points to some deeper reason. Well, Watson, we can but possess our souls in patience and see what the hour may bring.
That hour was not long in striking. We crouched closer in the shadow as we heard the outer door open and shut. Then came the sharp, metallic snap of a key, and the American was in the room. He closed the door softly behind him, took a sharp glance around him to see that all was safe, threw off his overcoat, and walked up to the central table with the brisk manner of one who knows exactly what he has to do and how to do it. He pushed the table to one side, tore up the square of carpet on which it rested, rolled it completely back, and then, drawing a jimmy from his inside pocket, he knelt down and worked vigorously upon the floor. Presently we heard the sound of sliding boards, and an instant later a square had opened in the planks. Killer Evans struck a match, lit a stump of candle, and vanished from our view. Clearly our moment had come. Holmes touched my wrist as a signal, and together we stole across to the open trapdoor. Gently as we moved, however, the old floor must have creaked under our feet, for the head of our American, peering anxiously round, emerged suddenly from the open space. His face turned upon us with a glare of baffled rage, which gradually softened into a rather shamefaced grin as he realized that 2 pistols were pointed at his head. Well, well, I guess you've been one too many for me, Mr. Holmes. Saw through my game, I suppose, and played me for a sucker from the first. Well, sir, I hand it to you. You have me beat, and in an instant he had whisked out a revolver from his breast and had fired 2 shots. I felt a sudden hot sear, as if a red-hot iron had been pressed to my thigh. There was a crash as Holmes's pistol came down on the man's head. I had a vision of him sprawling upon the floor, with blood running down his face, while Holmes rummaged him for weapons. Then my friend's wiry arms were around me, and he was leading me to a chair.
You're not hurt, Watson. For God's sake, say that you are not hurt.
It was worth a wound. It was worth many wounds to know the depth of loyalty and love which lay behind that cold mask. The clear, hard eyes were dimmed for a moment, and the firm lips were shaking. For the one and only time, I caught a glimpse of a great heart as well as of a great brain. All my years of humble but single-minded service culminated in that moment of revelation. It's nothing, Holmes. It's a mere scratch. He had ripped up my trousers with his pocket knife.
You are right, it is quite superficial.
His face set like flint as he glared at our prisoner, who was sitting up with a dazed face.
By the Lord, it is well for you. If you had killed Watson, you would not have got out of this room alive. Now, sir, what have you to say for yourself?
He had nothing to say for himself. He only sat and scowled. I leaned on Holmes's arm, and together we looked down into the small cellar which had been disclosed by the secret flap. It was still illuminated by the candle which Evans had taken down with him. Our eyes fell upon a mass of rusted machinery, great rolls of paper, a litter of bottles, and, neatly arranged upon a small table, a number of neat little bundles.
Printing press, a counterfeiter's outfit.
Yes, sir. The greatest counterfeiter London ever saw. That's Prescott's machine, and those bundles on the table are 2,000 of Prescott's notes, worth 100 each and fit to pass anywhere. Help yourselves, gentlemen. Call it a deal and let me beat it.
You don't do things like that, Mr. Evans. There is no bolt hole for you in this country. You shot this man Prescott, did you not?
Yes, sir. Got 5 years for it, though it was he who pulled on me. 5 years, when I should have had a medal the size of a soup plate. No living man could tell a Prescott from a Bank of England, and if I hadn't put him out, he would have flooded London with them. I was the only one in the world who knew where he made them. Can you wonder that I wanted to get to the place? And can you wonder that when I found this crazy boob of a bug hunter with a queer name squatting right on the top of it and never quitting his room, I had to do the best I could to shift him? Maybe I would have been wiser if I had put him away. It would have been easy enough, but I'm a soft-hearted guy that can't begin shooting unless the other man has a gun also. But say, Mr. Holmes, what have I done wrong anyhow? I've not used this plant. I've not hurt this old stiff. Where do you get me?
Only attempted murder, so far as I can see. But that's not our job. They take that at the next stage. What we wanted at present was just your sweet self. Please give the Yard a call, Watson. It won't be entirely unexpected.
So those were the facts about Killer Evans and his remarkable invention of the 3 Geradebs. We heard later that our poor old friend never got over the shock of his dissipated dreams. When his castle in the air fell down, it buried him beneath the ruins. He was last heard of at a nursing home in Brixton. It was a glad day at the Yard when the Prescott outfit was discovered, for though they knew that it existed, they had never been able, after the death of the man, to find out where it was. Evans had indeed done great service and caused several worthy CID men to sleep sounder, for the counterfeiter stands in a class by himself as a public danger. They would willingly have subscribed to that soup plate medal of which the criminal had spoken, but an unappreciative bench took a less favourable view, and the killer returned to those shades from which he had just emerged.
Woo! Love
Whoa.
wins!
Love literally wins.
Love literally wins. Oh. So that's our bedtime stories for you tonight, everyone.
You get it now, Clearty?
You get it? You see it? Yeah, the Gyarados were fake. I'm sorry I lied to you.
Well, there was one real Gyarados.
There was one
Nathan.
real one. Oh. Yeah, I hope everyone had fun.
Yeah.
This was the first time we had done this, but I don't think it'll be the last. So keep an eye out in the future for more of these, I guess.
Watch out. Oh, thank
Yay,
you.
thank you. Speaking of thanking Var, thank you one more time for
Thank you.
this fucking art. It's so good. Thank you so much.
Sorry I put 69 in bullet holes on it.
Yeah, sorry to put a big 69 on your wall. This wasn't in the initial plan, if you can imagine.
No, I had the idea like 2 days ago, and I was like, oh shit, feverishly putting bullet holes in the shape of a 69.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Oh, that was so much fun. I hope everyone had fun. I was so scared, so nervous, but it's so fun, right? I can't believe it. I cannot believe wait, let me send a picture to you, Denim.
Yeah.
So I said this yesterday. I swore that I would not make my most egregious mistake of saying that we shot a man in 1985.
The funny thing is, I think in practice you only made that mistake one time.
Once!
Every other time you'd said 1895.
I did. Oh, really funny. Wow. Oh,
We did it.
we did it. Is there anything else we have to?
Oh, you missed it.
Oh man,
We're all
wrapping
done.
up.
There's a VOD.
There's a VOD.
Or there will be, rather, a VOD.
Yeah. Final explanation for people who missed the first two ones. This was, a celebration of it being 69 days until Sherlock Holmes will be public domain and is allowed to, respect women.
Yeah, and also have emotions in general.
Also have emotions,
Which,
yes. And
You know, it's
like
silly
dogs.
that they decided that, because as you saw, especially in this last one, he had emotions even in stories
Yeah.
that are public domain already.
Yeah. You know how it is. Copyright. These bitches gay though.
Literally. When are we gonna have that adaptation? There was that movie in like 1971, but it wasn't
Yeah.
explicit.
No. It was a good movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope everyone understands Sherlock Holmes gay now.
Yeah.
This man has single-handedly uprooted my life. Oh,
He literally has some
Um,
fucking emotions.
he literally has emotions. I hate him so much. He's my best friend and my worst enemy, and a heap of laundry and a
Yeah,
little action figure
he's a
and a little pet
molecule.
dog. He's a fucking single molecule of water. Um,
Who's
so yeah.
homophobic?
I think I did say I hated Sherlock Holmes and also he's gay.
Oh, right. Yeah, very homophobic of you, Scrap.
I'm so sorry. I take it all back. Sherlock Holmes is my best friend. Oh.
Oh, he's a mullet, like the
He's a
fish or the
mullet.
hair.
He's like a goldfish to me.
Yeah.
I'm putting like the cheapest flakes from the pet store into his fucking tank.
Yeah. He doesn't
All he's
deserve the
getting.
good stuff. Oh, folds him.
Holding him up.
Remember the thing you drew where he was on the clothesline?
Yeah, I do remember my first ever drawing of Sherlock Holmes where he's pinned to a clothesline. But in my defense, he was 20 years old then.
Right.
And more pathetic than ever.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Well, I'm fucking exhausted.
Yeah, right? I ran a marathon just now.
Oh.
Yeah. Sherlock Holmes is a good name for a fish.
True.
Anything else we needed to do?
Well, I need to have like a popsicle.
Well, yes.
But that won't be on stream.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone so much for coming. Genuinely, it's like
But you.
coming to the stream and then sticking around and listening to our stupid 69 joke is I really appreciate it so much.
Yeah.
So yeah. I hope everyone has a wonderful night and sweet dreams of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, if you are into that sort of thing.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I'm just saying shit.
Yeah. Well. Goodbye, everybody.
Fish Gubaba.
Take care. The desk.
The desk flew away when I tried to grab Frack.
Hi, ladies. Bye, ladies.
Bye, ladies. I'm Frack. Oh wait, bye,
This has
ladies.
been-
I'm Denim Snack.
This has been Frack.
This has been Frack.
Denim Stack and Scrap.
Stack. This has been Denim Snack and Scrack. Signing off. Bye.
Signing off. Good night, everyone.
Good night.